Hello everyone, and today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have a video series of how to create custom speaker boxes for the S550 Mustang. Now this is going to be broken up into several videos just so we can cover all the steps. And we're going to go ahead and install 10-inch subwoofers in these tight spaces within the trunk. And this is actually not very hard to do, it's just very time consuming, but it came out looking really good, so let's get started. So at the start of this project, I went ahead and cut out a 10-inch ring just to mimic the size of a 10-inch speaker. And looking at it, it looks like it might just fit on the driver's side. It might be a little tight, but it looks like we can make it fit there. And then looking on the passenger side, we have plenty of room. We can even put a 12 here if we wanted to, but I think a 10 is going to come out looking good. So the first thing I'd like to do is go ahead and trace out this area. And I made a custom-made gauge right here. You can see nice little curved in, a nice little smooth in on one side, and then I put a carpenter's pencil on the other side. So as we go along the edges, it should go ahead and trace out how it's going to look for the base. So as you can see, as I'm pushing in the rod, it's actually moving the pencil with it. And it's actually going to make a beautiful stencil when it's all said and done. It's just a little bit time consuming because I got to go very slow and very gently while keeping it squared off. And it's almost done. And just about right there. And now I'll go ahead and pick up the camera, that way you can see what I see. So we have a nice little pencil sketch right here. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So I'm going to go over this a few times just to get it nice and dark. And after a few passes, I can go ahead and take out the poster board. Comes out very easily. And then we're going to go ahead and cut out our stencil just with a utility knife. And I'm just going to go nice and slow just to make sure I don't cut my fingers and just to cover every curve. And it came right apart, and I'll just go ahead and clean up the edges just to make it nice and smooth. But overall, it looks like the shape we're looking for, not too shabby. And of course, we'll go ahead and do a test fit. And it doesn't look too shabby at all. Actually, it looks like it fits in there pretty nicely. I think the stencil's going to work out. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the exact same steps on the passenger side as well. We'll go ahead and trace it out. And again, we want to go very gently and slow. Now the first sketch may come out looking a little bit bad, but it's no big deal. I just went ahead and went back and forth a couple times until the sketch looks actually very uniform. And then the same thing as the first stencil, I went ahead and cut it out with a utility knife. It just went nice and slow just to make sure I cover those curves, and it came out nice and smooth. And of course, I'll go ahead and test fit the passenger side as well. Let me go ahead and throw that rod in there. And it looks like it's looking pretty good. Now I used a nice little flat rod right here just to give you an idea of how squared off it is with these edges right here. And then over here as well. And it looks like it comes out looking really good. And looking at this side as well, let's look at the driver's side. Oh yeah, this doesn't look bad at all. I think this is going to come out looking really good. So if the stencil's looking pretty good, I think we're ready to go ahead and make our base out of wood. So I have a nice little MDF board right here. This is a 12-inch by 48-inch board. This is very inexpensive and more than enough we're going to need. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and place a stencil on the very edge right here. And I'm going to use the flat side of the board with the flat side of the stencil. It just makes our job a lot easier. And again, take a pencil, trace it out. This is nothing you can't do. It's very easy. And then we're going to invert the other stencil just so we save space. That way it gives me another chance of a mulligan just in case I mess up. And then we'll go ahead and take our jigsaw, nice little wood cutting blade, and then cut this right out. So almost at the end. There we go. So we have a nice little passenger side base. And there's the driver's side base. Came out looking pretty good. And of course, I always like to test fit as we go along just to kind of see how it looks. We'll go and push the passenger side in first. Oh yeah, that actually kind of looks pretty good. You see a little bit of a gap. That's no big deal because we're going to curve off the edges and it's going to fit in there a lot better. Looking at the driver's side. Oh yeah, that looks really good as well. Again, we're going to sand it down and that's going to look really good. All right, let's keep moving. So now I'm going to go ahead and take my router and a 1/2-inch bit, and I'm going to cut out a rabbet under the base. The whole idea is later on when we go wrap the fleece around the base, we have a little pocket for it to sit in so it sits flush. Now as you can see, we got a nice little clean cut right there right under the base. That looks good. And on the other side as well, nice and clean. Now for this next step, this is going to be optional. This is just an experiment. I'm still going to keep that 1/2-inch bit on there, but I'm going to do something a little different. I want to go to the very top of the base and just cut a groove on the outside. I just want to kind of see if I can provide a pocket or something for all that extra resin to go to as I'm applying the fiberglass later on. So taking a look, this is the very top of the base. It's just a little groove area. So again, I'm just trying to see if this would work as far as capturing all that extra resin when it drips down. And it looks like it came out looking good, nice and uniform. So let's keep going. And just to make the base nice and clean, we're going to go ahead and sand all the edges. So I have a little 80 grit sandpaper on an electric sander. And I'm going to sand all the edges. One, this will make it nice and clean and make it good looking. as well as when you're applying the fleece later, it's not bending over a sharp surface. Instead, it's bending over a nice smooth surface. And then we'll go ahead and test fit one more time. Go ahead and push that right in. And again, this is after everything is sanded. You can still see some of the sawdust in the air. Oh, nice little flush edge right there. And that edge over there doesn't look too shabby at all. Again, we'll go ahead and check the driver's side. And again, sorry about the dust in there. We'll clean that up later. That actually looks pretty good. So far, I like this, how this is turning out. This is actually looking really promising. Not too shabby at all. All right, let's keep going. Now for our next step, I went online and just ordered extra rolls of masking tape because I have a feeling I'm going to need quite a bit. This is 6 rolls. It should be more than enough. We want to go ahead and tape off the area we're going to be molding in. Now the trim inside my car does hang a little bit. I don't know why. It just came from the factory like that. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that up just a little bit just by taping it upward. Just for start, you don't have to do this. This is just something I made it easy for me. However, after the project is complete, I'll probably go ahead and find a way to attach the trim inside the trunk a little bit better because this is kind of an eyesore for me. So I'll go and clean this up later because I noticed other Mustangs, they don't really hang in that one spot. It's kind of weird. So I'll just put a few pieces of tape right there just to make a nice clean mold. And then we'll continue on taping off the rest of the mold area, and we're going to go left and right until the whole area is covered. Now with the first layer complete, we went left and right. Now let's go up and down. So for the driver's side, we went ahead and used about 1.5 rolls, roughly. So not too bad. And it came out looking really good, covered the whole area. And just to fast forward a little bit, we were going to show you both sides. And we used about 2.5 rolls total just to cover both the driver's side and the passenger side. And these came out looking really good, really thick. That's what we want. And then I'll go ahead and pan over to the passenger side. That way you see what I see. And it doesn't look too shabby at all. Looks like we covered everything nice and thick. And the whole idea is you don't want the resin seeping through the tape and getting attached to the carpet. So now that everything's taped off, let's go ahead and apply a little bit of mold release. Now for this, we're going to use a little bit of paste wax. Now there is mold release out there for fiberglass, but I'm going to use a little bit of a cheap version since I already had this on the shelf. And I'm going to apply a nice thin layer to the tape. And all you gotta do is make sure you cover all the nooks and crannies and all the edges. And I'm gonna try to do my best to do that. And then I'm gonna let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. I went ahead and did 10 minutes because it's not very hot outside, nor is it in the sun. And make sure I cover both passenger and driver side. And then I'll take a nice little microfiber cloth, nice clean one, and wipe all that extra wax right off the tape. And take your time with this, that way you don't peel the tape up with it. And now probably for our most important step, we got to lay down some drop cloth. Now this is really cheap stuff, but it's very important because if you miss an area, it's a good chance you're probably going to get resin on a part of your trunk you don't want resin on. So I put the drop cloth all over the trunk and I put a piece of cardboard in there just to help weigh it down in the edges. And I'll get my baseboards in there as well. Go ahead and throw them in just to hold the plastic down. And I'm obviously going to throw tape along the edges, again, just to make sure no resin or anything seeps through and gets on the carpet or anywhere in the trunk we don't want it. That's the last thing you want on your nice, beautiful Mustang. And we'll go ahead and pan over our drop cloth area. So I went ahead and went everywhere in the trunk as much as I could, as well as I put a little bit under the base, 1, to act as a paperweight, and 2, just to make sure nothing seeps under it. And it looks like we got everything taped off, so let's keep going. Alright, now let's go ahead and take our fiberglass mat. This is really good stuff and very durable. Now this is a very big sheet. It's almost like a blanket. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of unfold it a little bit and rip it apart. Now I'm going to start with like a 6-inch sliver. So you can see I'm kind of peeling it apart right there. Come on. There we go. And it will peel apart. It's best not to do scissors. It's best to actually pull it apart. You actually want those fibers kind of sticking out. It helps it bind the other slivers together when you fiberglass the whole thing as a set. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull off probably about a 12-inch sliver. There we go. And I'm going to keep doing this over and over. I kind of want a pile of 6 by 12-inch slivers. And for those of you who want to make a smaller pieces, like a 6x6, that's probably a good thing. But for me, I have a nice little stack right here, and we'll pull one out. So this one's about 6x12, roughly, and it looks really good. See how it's kind of shredded on both sides? That's what we want. Now let's go ahead and take a nice little measuring cup right here. And I went ahead and marked it where we want to fill it to. So I put about 14, which is about 28 ounces. We're going to go about almost 29 ounces. We want 28.75. And now I'll go ahead and grab my resin. I have a nice little gallon jug right here, so it's going to be more than enough for today. And then it comes with 2 tubes of hardener. And I'll go ahead and fill this all the way up to about 28.5, almost 29. And I'll start slowing down towards the edge there. And then for the hardener, we want about 11 milliliters. It's right where that line is right there. So when you tip it over, there's about 22 in the tube. And we want to use about half the tube. And I'm going to go ahead and just squirt that right in there. Now, if you're doing little bits at a time, you can always do 1 ounce of resin to 10 drops of hardener. So if you're ever doing small amounts, you can just count out the drops. But for this one, I'm just using 11 milliliters, which made my job really easy and quick. And now I'll go ahead and take my mixing stick, and we want to mix this up really well. You want to make sure all that hardener is mixed in with that resin. So go ahead and give it a nice little mix for about a good minute to 2 minutes. And after it's mixed, we're going to quickly work our way to the trunk and then take our chip brush and apply a nice thin layer of resin to our tape. This will help the fiberglass stick to the tape as we're applying it. Now you need to work somewhat quickly because you got a 10 to 15 minute working time before this resin hardens. And now I can take my fiberglass mat. I'm going to apply a nice little thin layer to the bottom where the base and where the tape meet. I want to actually have a little bit on the base and a little bit on the tape. And as you apply resin, you want to do a stabbing motion with your brush. You want to go ahead and kind of press it right into the tape. This will help the fiberglass stick, as well as start getting those air bubbles out. So you can see I'm just making stabbing motions with the brush. And as we're applying the fiberglass down and stabbing it, we're going to take one of these rollers and roll it right up against the fiberglass just to remove all the air bubbles as well as smooth it right out. About 3 hours have passed, and this is kind of what we're looking at. Now this does look pretty rough, but this is expected. The whole idea is we want to just get a mold here. We don't have to be perfect, we just got to get the shape. And you can tell this side looks a lot better. I had a lot more room to work versus the driver's side, which is pretty rough, but I think this came out looking good. So now for the hardest part, we need to go ahead and remove the fiberglass mold. So I'm going to go ahead and try to pull it away. Unfortunately, it's in there really good. So what I'm going to do is take a ruler, or you could take a trim removal tool, and kind of get in between the tape and the carpet. Kind of just start peeling away little by little. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the edges and kind of pull it out little by little. Now this is a pain because I did use a lot of resin, especially on the passenger side. And eventually it did come out. And then taking a look at the trunk after we remove the molds, just very dirty. It just needs a good vacuuming, but overall looks pretty good. Not too shabby at all, and no damage to the carpet. And now let's take a look at our molds now that we're in the sun and get a better look at it. Now, these do look really rough. This is kind of what I did expect. I'm not a professional fiberglasser, but it actually came out somewhat decent. I can actually work with this. So now let's go ahead and pan over the driver's side. Now, this side does look really rough, mostly due to the fact that it's a very tight area to work in, but it did retain its shape, and we can go ahead and keep moving forward. So just as a little added trick, I have a stool that I placed upside down, and I put it right under some drop cloth just to make sure I keep it clean. And then I can place the fiberglass mold right in the stool just to kind of act as a holder. So as you can see, it sits it upright and it makes it easier for us to work with. So now that we have a mold in a better position to work with, I'm going to apply a second layer of fiberglass. This will help reinforce it as well as cover any areas we missed. Now the first step I'm going to do is the same thing as earlier. Apply a nice thin layer of resin within the mold. And then take small pieces of fiberglass mat, and we're going to just do a small area at a time. Apply some resin and then stab it down with our brush. Same thing as earlier. And this is also a great opportunity to get any areas you missed or any voids that may have come up. And with all the edges covered, it looks like we have a nice little second layer applied. And after the fiberglass is cured, this is what we got. Now these look pretty rough, which is what we expect. Now taking a look, you do see some air bubbles in there, again, because I had a little bit of hard area to work with. But don't worry, as we get through the video series, these are going to look better and better.